Hi, greetings. This is Krishna Kumar. I just want to get myself introduced. I have 21 years experience in IT industry. I am at PMP since 2009. I have multiple other certifications as well. So here I'm going to help you, try to understand what the PMP, what the concepts about the PMP, and provide you tips to appear for the exam as well. All right, so let's look at how a project charter is developed and what is the purpose of the project charter. The project charter helps organization establish a relationship, and this will be created by the project sponsor. So once approved, it formally initiates the project. It also identifies a project manager, and here in the project charter is where we will be talking about or capturing all the high level requirements, high level risk, and whatever the assumptions that are there will be documented. And once this project charter is created, it will be circulated to all the stakeholders, and once they are all in sync, then the project charter will be approved. So if you see here, the documents also will have the measurable objectives, it will have the summary budget, the constraints and assumptions, and finally it will be signed by the sponsor. Welcome to the next lesson, which is project integration management. This is the very first knowledge area that we are going to look at out of the 10 knowledge areas, and very key knowledge area from a project management perspective. So the lesson agenda is we're going to look at the project integration management, the processes. We'll just have a very quick brief of what all these project integration management processes are, what we should know about the project integration management. And these are the processes: the develop project charter, develop project management plan, direct and manage project work, manage project knowledge, monitor and control project work, perform integrated change control, close project or phase. So these are the processes that we'll be talking about in the project integration management knowledge area. So in this screen that we are going to look at the entire snapshot of this PMP, all the knowledge areas and the processes which I've already looked at. So the blue color here highlights all the processes that come under this project integration management knowledge area. So the develop project charter, which is part of the initiating, develop project management plan, which is part of the planning process group, direct manage project work, manage project knowledge. These are the two processes that are part of executing. Monitor and control project work, perform integrated change control, part of the monitoring and controlling process group. And finally, closing project or phase, part of closing process group. So what is project integration management? So as per the PMBOK definition, it is the processes and activities to identify, define, combine, unify, and coordinate the various process and project management activities within the project management process groups. So here we are going to kind of integrate all the processes that the project manager is going to work on. We are talking about 49 processes, and here we are going to talking about the 7th process in the project integration management. So which is the 42 processes that we are going to work across the other knowledge areas. So all these the project manager is going to integrate on a day-to-day basis. So he will not be able to work on silos. Like today I cannot say that I'll be working on cost management, tomorrow I'll work on quality management. That's not possible, right? So here we are going to integrate, and these are the processes that we have already seen, 4.1 to 4.7 here, right from develop project charter to close project or phase. So what is the project manager doing? The project manager is constantly integrating throughout the life of the project. So every single day, every single activity that he's going to do, he needs to look from a different perspective, all the processes, right? So we have to integrate everything. He's going to constantly integrate throughout the life cycle of the project. So it includes characteristic of unification, consolidation, communication, integrative actions, which are important for the successful completion of the project. Okay, so here we are going to talk about what we should know about the project integration management. So here the project manager includes making choices related to resource allocation, making trade-off among the competing objectives and alternatives. And basically, the key thing that we need to note here is managing interdependencies of the project management knowledge areas. So this is one of the reasons why the project manager's existence itself is there, because it's a primary role of a project manager to integrate all these processes. So that is what this is. And it's a only knowledge area which is having processes in all the process groups. So if you see, develop project charter starts from initiating, and then we have closing project or phase, which is in closing, and also we have processes in planning process group, executing process group, and monitoring and controlling process group. So from exam perspective, we can think about, only knowledge area which is having processes across all these process groups. So describe high level work the project manager does. And project management processes do not happen independently. This is what I was mentioning earlier. So we'll not be talking about working in silos on all the processes. We have to, as a project manager, we have to integrate everything together. Project manager integrates them in order to achieve the project objectives. The project monitor and control project work, process results and change requests. So what do we do in monitoring and controlling? We have already seen in the earlier lesson. So we try to we monitor the progress of the project. So we look at the baselines, and we try to see whether we are on track. In case of any deviations, then we need to take a control action. So we have whether it's a preventive action or a control action. That may result in change requests, and that's going to be updated in the project management plan and the project documents as well. The changes are accepted or rejected and handled in the integrated change control process, one of the very key process in the project integration management. And this talks about taking all opportunities to improve existing processes. So we need to continually improve on all the processes that we are doing here. So let's look into the very first process in project integration management, which is develop project charter. So this is the process where the project charter is going to be created, and the project charter will be approved, and that's where the project manager will be identified, and it will give the authorization for the project manager to go ahead with the project, which we saw in the earlier video, right? So let's look at the definition from the PMBOK perspective. What this develop project charter does, it's a process of developing a document that formally authorizes the existence of a project and provides the project manager with the authority to apply organizational resources to project activities. So the way this entire PMP, all the processes, knowledge areas are structured is what we have seen earlier. It's every single process will have inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs. So for each process, we'll be looking at what are the different inputs, and using the tools and techniques, what is the output that we are going to deliver for process. So we know that any process, we need input, process, action will be done, and then there's going to be an output for every process. And that output will be used by other subsequent processes in the other knowledge areas or even the same knowledge area. So with respect to develop project charter, let's look at these inputs. The inputs are business documents, agreements, enterprise environment factor, which we have already seen, organization process assets, and the tools and techniques, expert judgment, data gathering, interpersonal and team skills, and meetings. And what is going to be the output? The project charter itself and the assumption log. So the key benefits out of this process is a well-defined project start and project boundaries, creation of a formal record of the project, and a direct way for the senior management to formally accept and commit to the project. So this project charter is one document which is going to really authorize the project, and the project managers provides authorization for the project manager to go ahead and get the resources and start off with the project work. Now in the subsequent slides, we'll be looking at the details of each and every input, tools and techniques, and output. So here let's look at what a project charter is all about. It establishes a partnership between the organization that requests the work and the one that conducts the work. Once approved, it formally initiates the project, identifies a manager, which we have already seen, gives the project manager authority to plan and execute the project, and it talks about the purpose of the project. And if you look at it, it's going to contain all the high level detail of who are all the stakeholders, what are the high level requirements, because it's not going to contain the entire requirements at this stage. We'll be doing it during the project management when we develop a project management plan. But here we're going to have a high level requirements, high level risks, it will have a high level milestones. So all anything that you look at from a very high level perspective, everything will be documented here. And it talks about what is that product of the project, what is that we are going to deliver, and it's going to have the measurable objectives, what are the different metrics that we are going to really see for the performance of the project, list what is required for approval and who does the approvals at every stage of the project, and of course the high level budget. And the key thing that we need to remember is the constraints and assumptions. So any project that we are going to kick off is going to start off with a lot of assumptions in place which needs to be documented. So at this point in time during initiation, there are going to be a lot of questions, a lot of assumptions getting into the project when we are coming out with a high level budget and high level schedule, right? So those assumptions are also documented. And finally, it includes signature approval of all the sponsors. And finally, I mean, this signature will be obtained once all the stakeholders are engaged and they are in sync with what is the content of the project charter. And finally, it gets approved. So let's look at the inputs to the project charter. The first input being the business document. So what does a business document contain? It contains the business case and the benefit management plan. What's a business case? Business case is nothing but a justification document. So why are we doing this project? So a lot of times the project managers do not know why. We know what needs to be delivered, what needs to be done for the project, but sometimes we don't know why. Business case acts as a very important input for any project manager, because once the project manager understands why is the project being done, then the way that project is delivered, to my personally I feel that it could be delivered in a much more efficient and effective way. So that becomes an key input for this project charter. And an additional input that we would like to know about what this project charter, I mean what we need to know about this project charter. So it may be created by the manager. So we saw that we identify this project charter identifies the project managers, but sometimes you may have seen in organization that project managers are identified first even before the kickoff, right? So in that case, who develops this project charter? Yeah, project manager may develop a project charter, but of course it will be approved by the project sponsor. Broad enough so that it does not need to change. So this goes with the last statement which is underlined here. Any change to the charter should question validity of a project. So why do we say that? It's a static document. It's not a living document. Project charter is something that has been prepared at the beginning of the project. And if the project charter has to undergo a change, which means, it questions the validity of the project itself. Any other document during the course of the project may undergo a change, but not the project charter. Please keep in mind, it's very, very important. A project charter is not a living document and it is a static document. The other key input that we saw, one is a business case, the other one is the benefit management plan, which is going to talk about what is a benefit, right? So how do we arrive at the benefit? When we start a project, how is the project being selected? So there are few business case formulas that we are going to see in the next few slides from here. The first one being the present value. So what is the present value? A future amount of money that has been discounted to reflect its current value as if it existed today. Say for example, if I need $100,000 in another 5 years down the line, so do I invest today $100,000? No. So probably I may invest $70,000, keeping in mind your discount rate or an interest rate, right? So that is today's value. So which is $70,000 today is not equal to $100,000 after 5 years, right? So that is what we call as present value. A dollar today is worth more than a dollar tomorrow. So example, a sum of $400 being paid right now will be more valuable than $400 being paid 3 years from now, because we applied the discount factor or an interest rate here. That is present value. Now, for any project to be selected, we have to take the net present value, which is we have to take care of the future years, future cash flow that's going to come in for forecasting. So maybe we say the first year this much we are going to forecast, the revenue inflow is going to be this, second year is going to be that. So how do we calculate the present value? So we need to use the formula which is calculated like present value for the year end is future value for year end divided by 1 plus r the whole power n. So what is n here? N here represents the year in which we are going to, for which we are going to calculate. The future value is the value that we are forecasting, and r is nothing but the discount rate here. Now, from exam point of view again, you may have, there may be multiple projects that's given, project A, project B, project C, and with the different net present values, and ask a question, so which project would you choose among these projects? So always remember the net present value, the higher the better. So how do we arrive at this net present value? So now here we have seen that the formula, which is PV of n, is FV of n divided by 1 plus r the whole power n. So we'll look at the other inputs. So one input that we have seen is the business case and the benefit management plan. The other inputs are agreements. So agreements is the contract that the project team has gotten with the customer. So what does the contract talk about? It defines the initial intention for the project. It's going to talk about what needs to be delivered, an agreement between the customer and the service provider here. So used when a project is performed for an external client. So when I do for an external client, I get into a contract. So if it is something within the organization like a product company, we don't get into a contract here. So when we have this agreement, so the project charter, so the customer will have his own project charter from his side, whereas the party who is going to do the project is going to have a project charter, which is what we have seen in this process. The next input is enterprise environmental factors. So what are the factors that are responsible, or what are the factors that influence the organization to do a project? So the factors could be multifold. Like we saw earlier, the factor could be during the internal restructuring, or internally I need to do something, I need to create a software, or any not only software, any kind of project. Or it is because the customer has asked, we are doing a project, which is kind of an external factor. Or it could be due to some government regulations. So government is coming up with a new standard, for example in US HIPAA compliance, anything that changes within a HIPAA compliant. So you may have to go and implement that within your project. So you may have to do a project for that. For example, if you take in India, we have this GST that came into picture, so due to which we had to create projects. So these are the influences, external influences, that makes us do a project here. And then we have the organization process assets. This is going to be predominantly a key input for all the processes that we are going to talk about, if not all the 49, but majority of the processes, because this organization process assets is nothing but a repository, knowledge repository. It's going to have all the historical records of the organization. So not only this project, the previous projects. So why isn't there an input here? So here a project manager or sponsor who is going to create this project charter may go and refer to the OPA and see if similar projects, how was the project charter created. So that's going to be kind of a reference here. And of course, any project charter templates, policies, procedures that needs to be followed while creating this project charter, that also will be referenced as part of this. So that's going to be a key input. OPA plays a key input. Now let's look at the tools and techniques. So the first technique here we are seeing is expert judgment. Expert judgment is, we have all received all these documents, the business case, benefit management plan, and the contracts. We have references from EEF, OPA. So a lot of things are there. So as a project manager, you go through all these documents, understand all these documents. That's one thing. The other one is, I can go and talk to multiple experts within my organization to see how these project charters are done. So I get some advice as well. So used to assess inputs during the develop the project charter and apply to technical and management details. So we try to get more data input about this project, and this helps me to go and produce the project charter. And so we spoke about collecting all the high level details. So talking about the high level requirements, risks needs to be understood, coming up to the quality requirements, the metrics, right? So how do we do that? It's not the project manager is going to sit alone and do this. So it's going to brainstorm, create focus groups, interviews among all the stakeholders, try to understand, so and come out with whatever the details that are required. Then the interpersonal and team skills like active listening. So during this data gathering process, of course, this interpersonal and team skills is really going to be helpful. Networking, talking to different people within the organization. Facilitation. So I need to facilitate. So if I have to have multiple stakeholders come up with a consensus, then as a project manager, need to act as a facilitator. Then of course the leadership and political awareness will help gather all these details. And then the meetings. So meetings is again used to discuss and address pertinent topics of the project when directing and managing project work. Each attendee should have a defined role to ensure appropriate participation. So the project manager here again acts as a facilitator. He conducts meetings in order to get all the required details for him to create a project charter here. And the key output of this process is going to be one document. Two documents are going to be there. One is a project charter itself, which we have already seen, and the assumption log. So I just mentioned about the assumption log earlier. So this is going to contain all the assumptions and constraints that have been taken into account for this project. This is very, very important because when we do a risk analysis later, this assumption log is going to really help us to determine whether all the assumptions that we have made, have they been converted into risk, or that could be, it's possible that it is not even a risk at all. So but we need to be clear when we kick off a project, what are the assumptions that are made should be documented, because it cannot just be in our mind there. So it talks about high level strategic and operational assumptions and constraints that are normally identified in the business case before the project is initiated. So this provides us a better clarity in terms of how we are approaching the project. So the next process is develop project management plan. And this is part of your planning process group. And here, this is the very key process in terms of planning. That is, we are going to develop the project management plan. So what is this project management plan? So it is nothing but creating all the other subsidiary plans. Like for example, in the scope management knowledge area, we'll be creating a scope management plan. Then in the schedule management knowledge area, we'll be creating a schedule management plan. Similarly, the quality, cost management plan, risk management plan, and so on. So the remaining all the knowledge areas, we'll be creating every plan, and all these put together is what we call as project management plan in a single document. It may be a single document which has everything appended, or it could be a single document with the subsidiary plans like whatever we have mentioned there. So it's a process of defining, preparing, and coordinating all the subsidiary plans and integrating them into a comprehensive project management plan. So here the inputs are going to be the project charter, that's which was prepared as part of the previous process, which is the develop project charter. Then output from other processes. So one thing then, when we are looking at all these processes, one tip that I would give you here is, do not look at every process as the very first time. So think about this, all these processes are happening nth time. So which means I have gone through at least one round of all these processes as a manager. So if you look at from that perspective, output from other processes is maybe, that could be an output from communication plan, which is going to be an input here, output from a cost management knowledge area, which is going to be an input here. So because a project management plan cannot be developed very first time, so it has to go through multiple iterations. So that's the key here. And of course your EEF and OPA, that's going to be another inputs. Then the tools and techniques, again expert judgment, data gathering. So some of the techniques that you see here may get repeated for multiple processes, interpersonal and team skills, meetings. So these are some of the things which we have already seen in the develop project charter. So same kind of techniques is used here. And the key thing is the output, which is the project management plan. So we get an output called one single document, a project management plan, which is the key benefit of this is central document that defines the basis of all project work. So what is this project management plan going to contain? Let's look at the next slide. The project management plan is developed iteratively. As I said, it's not one single iteration, nothing can be developed. Defines how the project will be executed. So in the planning process group, if you look at it, all the documents that we are going to create in the planning talks about how. And in execution, we will just follow the how and execute it. So it's going to talk about how we'll execute, how we are going to monitor the project, how we are going to control the project, and how we are going to close the project. So that's exactly what will be defined completely. And this project management plan, the set of documents that I mentioned is project management plan as a document and other 9 subsidiary plans as a document. The 3 other things that are going to be key part of this project management plan. If I want to baseline a project management plan, then I need to have other 3 baselines, which is nothing but scope, schedule, and cost. So I need to baseline my scope, I need to baseline my schedule, and I need to baseline my cost. So which we have already seen, it's nothing but the triple constraints. So this project management plan is an approved, controlled document, and that cannot be changed unless a change request is generated and approved. So here, which means that it's a living document which can go through a change, but with the control, in a controlled manner, which is you introduce a change management process here. And once I baseline a document, I will not be able to make a change unless it goes through a change request, proper change request process. It should be in alignment with the program management plan if applicable. If my project is part of a program, then my project management plan should be in line with my program management plan. So it's not necessary that all projects need to be part of a program anyway. So the project management plan should not be confused with the project documents. So because this is one thing that we'll be looking at in the entire PMP course, that project documents. So whenever we talk about project documents, we need to see that it is other than the project management plan. So if we are talking about this plan, we will clearly mention this term project management plan here. Okay, anyway, we'll go through that in the coming slides. So the project management plan, some of the terminologies here, performance measurement baselines. So what is that performance measurement? So we have already seen that, scope, time, and cost baselines, that part of your project management plan. So how do I measure the performance of the project? How do I track my project using these baselines? So which is the scope, time, and schedule against which the PM reports. So whenever a project manager is going to send out a status report to the management, then if he's saying that it is delayed or it is on time or it is ahead of schedule, how do we measure it? It's against the baseline. Then the requirements management plan, this is going to have how am I going to collect the requirements, how am I going to document the requirements. We'll be talking about more in that scope management later. And the change management plan, this talks about how the change will be addressed. So like we saw that project management plan, once we baseline, it can undergo a change through a change management process. But what is that change management process is all about? So that is where the change management plan comes into picture, talking about how the changes will be addressed and how the changes will be managed and controlled here. The change control system talks about all the reports, processes, procedures, and software to track and control the changes. So it's part of your configuration management plan sometimes. Yeah, so configuration management system. So that's these 3 go together. In fact, the process improvement also. So change control system talks about all the process procedures. The configuration management plan talks about how the PM will make changes, manage changes to the deliverables, and the resulting documentation, including all the tools that will be utilized. So configuration management system is nothing but the tools, process, procedures that is providing. It's an enabler for doing your change control system and doing your configuration management. And finally, you have the process improvement plan. So how I may have multiple processes in my project, and I need to keep improving that. I cannot say that this process I've defined it once and it's going to be final. So I need to keep improving that. So I have a process improvement plan also. So how I'm going to measure my process outputs and how I keep improving that. Now let's look at the project management plan process, the inputs in a little bit detail. So the first input is project charter, which we have already seen. The project charter is a document that has been provided during the initiation, and that acts as a enabler for the project manager, or it authorizes the project manager to go ahead with the next process, which is the very first thing is he has to create a project management plan here. So based on the inputs that are there in the project charter, the project manager takes those inputs, and then the output from other processes, which I have just given a brief introduction. So outputs are integrated to create the project management plan. That is, that could be outputs from other processes across other knowledge areas that is going to act as a key for the project manager to develop this project management plan. And any baseline and subsidiary plans that are output from other planning processes or input to the process. And enterprise environmental factor, that's going to, what are the reasons, what are the things that are going to influence your project, that becomes an input here. And organization process assets. So one thing probably I would like to just give an example on the enterprise environmental factor is when you're creating a project management plan, when you're creating a project plan by itself. So what could be one thing? So from an internal organizational culture point of view, it depends on the number of working days, the number of days in a week that you're going to work. Maybe it's a 5 day, some organization may follow a 5-day week, some organization may follow a 6-day week. So these are some of the EEF factors which is going to be a key input for the project manager to create a project management plan accordingly. Then any other holidays, public holidays. So this is just a very small example that I'm giving you. There could be a lot of other factors during every process of different stages of the project management. There could be a lot of other factors which may influence the project manager to create a plan accordingly. And OPA, organization process assets, which is going to be a key input where the project manager will go and refer to the historical data, looking at the previous similar projects, how the project management plan was developed, and he can take references from there. So the tools and techniques here, it's the same as what we saw earlier, which is the expert judgment, which is again looking at the project charter as an input, now looking at all the influences that we are having. So project manager takes a call on that, and plus talking to other seniors, experts, and getting some inputs from them. And again, for project management, to create a project management plan, project manager cannot do this or create this plan independently. So project manager always involves all the stakeholders, corresponding respective stakeholders at any point, to discuss with them. So do a brainstorming, focus group, interviews, try to understand, and then using all these interpersonal and team skills and meetings. So these are the techniques that are used to come out, gather the data, gather the information, and then finally come up with the project management plan. So the output is going to be the project management plan, which is a document. So it talks about the execution, how the project will be executed, how the project will be monitored, how the project will be controlled, and how the project will be closed. Then it integrates all the subsidiary plans and baselines from the planning processes. So these are the 3 baselines which is going to include, which you've already seen, the scope baseline, schedule, and the cost baseline. And the subsidiary plans, I've just limited only a few here. There could be even more, like we have said, I've just said only 5 here, but we have 9 subsidiary plans altogether. And it may include the life cycle of a project, so which we have seen, what is the life cycle the project goes through, and anything that can be any quality or any tailoring consideration that may be required for this project, that also will be documented in the project management plan. And of course the other thing could be your change management plan, how the changes are going to be included, requirements for communicating with the stakeholders. This is actually a communication management plan which will be creating during the communication management knowledge area, and the key management reviews for content. So this is going to be the output of your entire project management plan. So this provides you one complete snapshot of what the project management plan is going to have. So here if you see all these 5 knowledge areas mentioned here, and the remaining 4 knowledge areas, which means all the 9 knowledge areas, all the subsidiary documents are created in these 9 knowledge areas. And the other add-on additional documents other than the knowledge area documents are your change management plan, requirements management, configuration management, process improvement plan. So these are all part of your entire project management plan, and of course the baselines. So we'll be talking more about the scope statement, WBS and WBS dictionary in the subsequent knowledge areas, in the scope management exactly. So this provides a nutshell of what the project management plan is all about. So this is a very key process because lots of processes which we are going to discuss in other knowledge areas are in planning. So this gives a fair idea of where the project manager has to concentrate a lot. Maybe in today's world we are not maybe spending much time on planning. Maybe we are not given time as well due to dynamic change in requirements and maybe time to market and other things. But if you follow this PMP process, if you look at it, almost 45 to 50% of the processes are in planning process group, which means a project manager has to really dedicate a lot of time thinking through in planning, because this is a phase where the project manager clearly explains how the project will be executed, how it will be monitored, controlled and closed. So when we go to the next step, like execution and monitoring, controlling, it's just a matter of going and referring to the project management plan and just acting accordingly. So that's where this particular process is going to be a very key process for a project manager's success. I wouldn't say 100% success, just you plan, everything will be right, but you think through and try to have a lot of details, lot of considerations while you're coming up with a plan, and then if you go and execute, it will be much more easier. You minimize a lot of risk or minimize the challenges during the execution of the project. Alright, so let's look at the next process, which is the direct and manage project work. So which is the third process that we are looking at, the project integration management, and it is part of executing. So now that we are done with the project charter, we created that during initiation, then we created a project management plan during the planning process group. Now we are going to follow that, take that plan, and we are going to execute that project. So what is direct and managed project work as per PMBOK? It's a process of leading and performing the work defined in the project management plan and implementing approved changes to achieve the project objectives. So what is approved changes here? So now we created a project management plan. Let's assume that we have started working on the project, we are in execution, we went to monitoring, controlling, there was some kind of deviation that happened, because we always monitor the performance of the project to see whether it is as per the baseline, whether it is within the scope, within the time and within the cost. So if there is any deviation, we have to take some control actions. So here when we need to take a control action, which means it has to go through a change request. So change request, a lot of people confuse that change request is always a new requirement coming from the customer. It is one of them. But if within the project execution, if there is something that I have to do in a different way for me to catch up with the work because it's been deviated, then I have to raise a change request as manager. So that is what we are talking about, implementing approved changes to achieve the project objectives. So let's look at the inputs, tools and techniques and outputs. The input is project management plan, which was the output of the previous process. That's a key input here. Then the project documents. These are the documents that have been created other than the project management plan, like I earlier explained. These are some of the documents like your risk register, your stakeholder register, issue log, your raising matrix, a lot of other documents which we'll be creating during the course of the project, with other processes. So that we combinedly call as project documents here. Then the approved change request, which is discussed, so that becomes an input. Then EEF, any factors that may influence me the way I'm today working on a project, executing a project. And OPA is my historical, the repository where I go and look at the historical data, and I may get some references there. The tools and techniques, expert judgment, project management information system, meetings, these are the techniques. So these are expert judgment and meetings are techniques, whereas project management information system is a tool which you are going to use to execute this project. And the deliverable, the key deliverable, the output is the key output is going to be the deliverables here. When I have a project, when I have planned for a project, once I execute, it's my output. That's the deliverables is going to be the output, which is going to be monitored and controlled and then finally closed. Work performance data, which we'll discuss in detail. Change requests may arise during the execution. Project management plan updates, document updates, and OPA updates. So OPA updates is nothing but all your lessons learned which you go and update in the organization processes at repository. So what is the key benefit that comes out of this direct and managed project? Provides overall management of the project work here. So what is that we need to know from this direct and managed project work? So what are the different kind of activities that we do here? So the key activities is one, we create deliverables, which has been underlined here. Generate work performance data. So during execution, there will be a lot of raw data that will be available. So work performance data is what? It is nothing but taking all the raw data during the course of the project. Say for example, I have a project plan. I have a lot of activities there, and each activity will have its own estimates. It will have a plan start date, it will have a plan end date, how many resources are going to work, what is the cost that has been budgeted for that, estimated for that. So all these are data that I have during planning. Now during execution, I know how many real actual resources are going to work, when actually I have started the activity, when I have closed the activity, what is the actual expense that I have incurred. These are all the raw data. That's the work performance data that we collect. Using these raw data, all these data are collated, processed, and then you get a information on that. That is what we call work performance information. So during the execution, we issue change request, implement approved changes into the work which has been taken decision during the perform integrated change control. Then that gets as an input, which we saw approved change request being an input, one of the key inputs to this process. Updating requirements, project logs, registers. So this is nothing but the project documents generally. Then performing activities to accomplish the project objectives as per the project management plan. Then of course the training, it's not about just going and assigning activities and getting things done. So what is that we need to do? What is that a project manager enable the team to do? By providing training, which we'll be talking more about in the resource management. Obtaining and utilizing resources such as tools, equipment, material, facilities. Ensuring standards and regulations are met. So this is where we plan for standards, to make use of the standards, but when we execute, we need to follow the standards. Establishing and managing communication channels, managing risks and implementing risk response activities. We would have planned for a lot of risks. So here execution is where you are going to tackle all the risks. And managing sellers and suppliers in case if I have to do some procurement, if I have to outsource some of my project work. So then the sellers and suppliers getting into picture. So that's where I start managing them here. Collecting and documenting lessons learned. So this is where we was talking about the OPA updates. So we go and document the lessons learned and we put it in the repository there. So with respect to the change requests are frequent output of many processes. It's not only the execution, even in monitoring, controlling is one of the key output will be the change requests. And update to the project map documents are frequent output of again many other project processes, because we'll be having a lot of small documents that we created for every single process that we may be seeing in other knowledge areas as well. So let's look at deep dive into the inputs, tools and techniques and outputs of the direct and manage project. The first input is the project management plan, so which we already seen in detail what this plan talks about. Then approved change request. So these includes the request reviewed and approved for implementation by the change control board. So which is the change control board is where the team of people are going to look at the changes and then they look at all the impact and then finally approve the changes. So that becomes a key input here for this direct and manage, because we are going to execute that. So that as I said, the approved changes need not only be new requirements. It could be a corrective action, or it could be a preventive action, or even if it's a defect repair. So let's say during the course of developing a project, during testing, we may find a lot of defects. So for fixing the defects, we may have to change our plan, right? So there we have to approve. Those changes has to be approved, and then that gets into execution here. So enterprise environmental factors, which we have seen earlier, organization process assets, where I go and refer to the repository. And the documents, project documents, as I described earlier, these could be some of the documents like change log, lessons learned register, project communications, milestone list, project schedule, risk register. These are just some of the sample list that's given here. There could be much more to the project documents, which will be encountering in multiple other processes. So now coming to the tools and techniques. Again, expert judgment. This is going to be a very common thing. Expert judgment, talking to experts and trying to find out what we are doing here. The project management information system. This is a tool here. The tool which is going to enable the project manager to execute a project. So I need to have a tool for me to plan. I need to have a tool for me to assign activities, track activities. So it's a scheduling tool, could be a scheduling tool, work authorization system. Work authorization system is I authorize a work to be done. So I'm done with something, for example, requirements. Now I authorize my team to go ahead and do the design next. So configuration management system where I have to do a version control. I need to baseline, so I need to have track multiple version history. An information collection and distribution system, it is nothing but your communication channel where I can post all my documents. I cannot be sending everything to email, so I may have to post it somewhere. So I need a tool for that. Or any interfaces to other online automated systems. So my project may be interacting with other projects as well, where I may have to integrate my systems as well. So that is generally called as PMIS, Project Management Information System. And then of course the meetings, because during the execution I may have to conduct project meetings with the team where I've discussed the day-to-day issues and any impediments that are there. So that is these are the techniques that we use in this direct and managed project. And what is the output that's going to be here? The deliverables. So what is the purpose of the project that is getting delivered after the execution? And during the course, we may have the issue log as well. This I will write it as output here. The issue log. So it's going to talk about any challenges, conflicts, issues faced by the manager, which needs to be documented and tracked to closure. And this issue log will be identified during the monitoring and controlling process. And any other organization processes and updates, because a lot of lessons learned is going to be there, which will be documented as and when we encounter it. Sometimes we tend to document it during the close of the project. So what happens is a lot of times we miss certain things during the end. Only those that are very which is very live or present at that point in time will be documented. Rather, some of the things are left out. So here this process or this output talks about any lessons learned, anything, any challenges, any best practices that a project follows should be documented as and when it is encountered, and it should be stored in a repository there. So the other outputs of this direct and managed project is work performance data, which we just discussed. Work performance data is nothing but the raw data that is being collected during the course of execution. The raw data could be all the data for an activity, like a plan start date, plan end date, actual start date, actual end dates, which we discussed, right? So these data will be collated. That's a work performance data. Then the change request, a formal proposal to modify any document, deliverable or baseline, and it can be direct or indirect, external or internal, initiated, and can be mandated. So it could be within the team, there is a change request that is raised. A change request could be raised during execution outside the team. So that's the internal or external. Then the project management plan updates. So during the course of execution, we may have to go and update. So elements that can be updated include but are not limited to. So we are just giving some sample here, which we can extend to other plans as well. The project document updates. So some of the project documents which we have seen, so those also can get updated. Say for example, risk. So we saw that risk is, during the risk register, it's going to have all the risks that are going to be available, and during the execution, when we respond to the risks, we may go and update the action. So we go and update the risk register and store it in the repository again. So that is the project document updates. So this concludes the direct and manage project. So which is nothing but taking the project management plan as an input, as a key input. So using these techniques, we are going to get an output which is nothing but the deliverables. So this deliverables now will be a major input to the next process group, which is nothing but the monitoring and controlling process. So moving on, we are coming to the next process, which is the manage project knowledge. So this is a new process that's been introduced in the PMBOK 6th edition, talking explicitly about the lessons learned. So as per PMBOK, this is a process of using existing knowledge and creating new knowledge to achieve the project's objectives and contribute towards organization learning. So let's look at the key inputs, tools and techniques and outputs for this managed project knowledge process. The inputs are your project management plan, project documents, the deliverables, which was the output of the previous process, EEF and OPA, and tools and techniques, again, expert judgment, knowledge management, information management, and interpersonal and team skills. The outputs are lessons learned register and project management plan updates and organizational process asset OPA updates. So what is the key benefit? It's the prior organization knowledge is leveraged. So this is what we are talking about in the OPA as well, going and looking at the repository. But repository in general, we talk about all the policies, procedures, templates, as well as some of the historical data of the previous projects. But the managed project knowledge literally concentrates on what is the best practices, what are the lessons learned in the previous projects that we can carry over in this project, or which we can take an input in this project for better project deliverables. So that's where we see the use of existing knowledge and creating new knowledge. So how we can better ourselves in executing this project. So let's look at what this project managed project knowledge is all about. We're talking about two things here. One is explicit knowledge and one is tacit knowledge. Explicit knowledge refers to knowledge codified using words, pictures, and number. So I can represent that, my knowledge here. Whereas tacit knowledge refers to knowledge that is personal and difficult to express, such as beliefs, insights. I may have my belief, I may have my experience based on certain things. I may have an experience which is sometimes very difficult for me to express that. So that is what we call tacit knowledge. So we need to, when we talk about a knowledge, we need to combine these two. So managing project knowledge is both tacit and explicit for two purposes. One, we need to reuse the existing knowledge, and creating knowledge as well. And also ensuring skills, experience and expertise of project team and other stakeholders are used before, during and after the project. So when we talk about lessons learned, say for example, during initiation or planning, if I am using this knowledge, I'll be able to handle a lot of things upfront. Then collecting and documenting the lessons learned throughout the life cycle of the project and sharing the knowledge to the team and stakeholders. So here we are focusing more on knowledge transition, or sharing with the team, knowledge sharing basically. That's a very important factor which will help the project team to be more efficient and effective as well. So managed project knowledge will now get into the inputs, tools and techniques and outputs one by one. Input, the project management plan, which is the output of the previous processes again. Project documents, which you have already seen, some of the documents listed down here. Especially the key thing that we need to look at is the lessons learned document or lessons learned register. Then project team assignments, resource breakdown, stakeholder register, but it's not limited again. There could be other documents as well. EEF and OPA, contributing towards the managed project knowledge process. The other input is the deliverables, which we saw the output of the previous process. So the tools and techniques, One is the expert judgment, again based on the lessons learned register, anything that we, based on the knowledge sharing that has been happening, then we talk to the experts and try to understand what can be. We cannot take everything as it is and implement, so we will have to talk to the experts and understand what it is. And then how do we manage knowledge management by use of tools such as scheduling, work authorization, some of the tools that listed here. Then information management, used to discuss and address pertinent topics of the project when directing and managing project work. How do we gather information? Each attendee should have a defined role to ensure appropriate participation. So how do I gather the information? I need to have a meeting, focus group, and then I need to get that information out of each participant. So the all the stakeholders basically try to understand their best practices, challenges, whatever the lessons learned are. So those are taken as a technique here. And then interpersonal and team skills, the active listening, networking, political facilitation, and leadership skills, which we have already seen. So this is going to be everywhere, wherever the human interactions are going to be. Output, organizational process asset updates, where we're going to store the all lessons learned register, which will be updated. And then the project management plan updates, any other document that get updated, which is the scope, requirements, schedule, cost, any other document during the process. So the next process in project integration management is monitor and control the project work, which is part of the monitoring and controlling process group. So sequentially we have initiated, we have planned, we have executed, now we are going to monitor and control it. So as per PMBOK, it's a process of tracking, reviewing, and reporting the progress to meet the performance objectives defined in the project management plan. So this is where we keep a checks and balance. Like a project is defined, we have defined the project management plan, how we are going to execute and monitor and control the project. So we execute it. Once that execution is done, during the course of execution, of course, so we need to monitor the status of the project, periodic intervals. So what do we monitor? We monitor against the scope, time, and cost, and lot of other things. But these are the key three areas by which the project is measured. And we try to monitor against the baselines, the cost, scope, and time. So now let's look at the inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs that are used to for this process. The inputs are the project management plan, project documents, other documents, agreements, work performance information, EEF and OPA. So these are the inputs. Techniques, expert judgment, some of the data analysis, some of the decision making techniques, meetings. And outputs are change request. So generally the key output will be the change request will be arising out of this monitoring and controlling process. So work performance reports and project management plan updates and project document updates. So these are the outputs. So the key benefit from this entire process is it allows the stakeholders to understand the current state of the project, what are the steps taken, and budget and schedule and scope forecast. So it gives you the complete snapshot of where the project is currently today. So what we should know about the monitoring and controlling projects. So control includes determining corrective or preventive actions. So during the execution, when we try to monitor, we may see that if there is something which may go wrong in future, which we anticipate, then we need to take a preventive action. But if something has already been deviated against the plan, then we need to take a corrective action in place. So control is taking that, trying to put the project back on track, then replanning and following up on action plans. So once we take a preventive or a corrective action, then which means we are going to alter the path of the work, right? So the way we are going to execute, we are just going to alter it a little bit. So for me to alter, then I will have to go and update the project management plan or any other key documents. So here we have to replan again. So the processes, this process focuses on maintain accurate and timely information, comparing against the plan, actuals against the plan. So this is going to give you, we'll have some of the methods for us to how do we do this comparison. Forecasting cost and schedule, assessing and reporting the performance. When does a project manager go and produce a status report? Once he monitors and comes up with the status report and also provides how he's going to control that preventive or corrective action. So that's providing status to the stakeholders, providing status and progress reporting to program management. If this project is part of the program, then this status has to be sent to the program management team. Then recommending changes, coming out with the change request, and updating the project management plan and project documents. So these are the activities then generally that happens around the monitoring and controlling projects. So monitoring is done throughout the project in order to obtain data related to the health of the project. So a project manager needs to decide depending on the size of the project. When I say size, it's about the timeline, maybe 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. So how frequently a project should be monitored. So that will be done entire life cycle of the project. So let's look at the inputs. The key inputs being the project management plan, which we already know, and the project documents. Again, some list of documents are given here, which is not limited. So these are the documents which may help during the monitor and control. Agreements. So agreements is nothing but the contract which we discussed in the very first process in the develop project charter, but that could be part of the key part of this monitoring controlling, because it's not only the monitoring controlling here, it's not only the project manager looking at the performance of the project, but here is where the testing is done. Here is where the customer comes in and tries to look at the deliverables, whether it is against the scope or it's against the agreement. So whatever has been delivered is part of the agreement. So that's where the agreement acts as a key input during this process here. The other inputs are the work performance information. Work performance information, we saw the work performance data, which is the raw data. When it is processed, becomes an information that becomes an input here. So talking about whether there are any variations, the deviations are there, variances are there. So based on which the project manager or the and the stakeholders collectively try to see whether a preventive or a corrective action has to be taken. And the other two are enterprise environmental factors, EEF and OPA. So these are the other two inputs. So now let's look at the tools and techniques. Again, the expert judgment, given that whatever the inputs that are there, the experts are consulted. The data analysis. So here we have the work performance information data. So now we need to look at where the project stands. So we have monitor and control, right? So the alternative analysis, cost benefit analysis, which we saw some of the techniques in the integration management earlier, like your NPV, cost benefit method. Then earned value analysis, which will be talking more in the schedule, the cost management, where earned value management techniques will be used. Root cause analysis, trend analysis, variance analysis. So these are all some of the analysis which will help the project manager and the team to look at where the project stands today, and are there any deviations, and then accordingly a preventive or corrective action needs to be taken. And of course the project meetings here, meetings here could be a project meeting or the meetings, status review meetings with the project management team, or it could be with the customers or external key stakeholders. Then decision makings, here is where we are talking about the testing and testing the product. The customer comes and validates the scope. Here internal QA testing happens. So the decision making will be a part of the key technique here to see whether we go to the next stage or not. Then the output is the change request. Based on whatever the technique that we have been used, the data analysis technique, especially with all the variance analysis, earned value analysis, then the project manager and the team decides whether there is any changes that needs to be incorporated to get the project back on track. So the changes can come from anywhere and by anyone. The changes need not be only from the customer. General perspective is that changes are coming only from customer, but the changes could be internal. Anything that we are going to replan for us to get the project deliverables out in the right time with the right scope, then the changes can come from within as well. So what we should know about the change request. So the change requests are inputs to the following processes. So one is perform integrated change control, which we'll be talking next, which is a very key process with respect to handling the changes. Then when approved, it goes to direct and manage project work. We saw that approved change request was part of the input, one of the key inputs in direct and manage process. Then quality control for inspection, because when the quality is testing, we need to know what are the changes that were approved. Then control procurements, in case if there are changes related to those work that's been outsourced to a supplier, then that will be a key thing which we need to take care if there any contract has to be modified there, for example. So change we need to look at, whenever there is a change, we need to look at the impact on a risk. Of course, the change control board will really be taking care about that, and we'll be talking more on that perform integrated change control process. So now we saw the inputs, tools and techniques. Let's look at the output of this manage and control project work. The first output is the work performance reports. So work performance information was an input, and now the reports is nothing but providing that information in a pictorial representation. So in terms of trying to probably coming out with a bar chart or a pie chart, giving it into the management which can be interpreted easily. So it's a physical or electronic representation of work performance information compiled in the project documents intended to generate decisions, actions or awareness. So rather than with the data just being in that available, so with the pictorial representation as a report, any stakeholder will be able to take decisions easily. And project management plan updates, any updates, because we are coming up with the change requests, any document may get updated, and of course any other project document also may get updated during the process. So that concludes the monitor and control project work process areas. Now let's move on to the perform integrated change control process next. So next key process in project integration management is perform integrated change control. So as the name suggests, it's an integrated change control. So for example, if I get a change from a customer, I need to add one more feature in my project. So that's a scope change. So I cannot just look at it in a silo. I need to look at it. If I take a change, then how is it going to impact me in other areas? For example, how is it going to impact me on time? How is it going to impact me on cost? How is it going to impact me on quality? Is there any risk that is going to be associated with this change? So a lot of other factors I need to look at it. For example, even resource management. So is there any new resource I need to bring it? Is there any resource, human resource or any other material that's going to get impacted? So do I need to look at it? Is it going to impact me on any procurement that has already been doing? So a lot of other areas. So that's where we call it as integrated change control, in the sense we look at all 360 degree and try to see all the impact, and then the changes are approved or rejected here. So from a PMBOK wise, it's a process of reviewing all the change requests, approving changes and managing changes to the deliverables, organization process assets, documents, project management plan, and communicating their disposition. So that's the definition, that's the purpose of this perform integrated change control as per PMBOK. So let's look at some of the tools and techniques, inputs and outputs of this process. The inputs are project management plan, the documents, all the documents that we'll be using during the course of the project, the work performance reports, the change request, EF and OPA. Tools and techniques, expert judgment, again meetings, change control tools, the configuration management tools, decision making and data analysis. Some of the analysis that we have earlier seen in the monitoring control, the same thing applies here as well. And the outputs are going to be approved change requests. That's a key output, because the purpose of this perform integrated change control is handling all the changes and try to see, handling in the sense taking all the changes and analyzing the changes and see whether it needs to be approved or rejected. And change log, all the changes are logged in this change log, and of course the project management and project document updates. So the key benefits is allows for documented changes within the project to be considered in an integrated fashion while reducing the project risk. So I don't take any changes in silo. I need to look at from all the other angles and then keep the risk as minimum as possible. Let's look at what we need to know about this perform integrated change control. What are some of the activities? Knowing that the change will occur or has occurred. Documenting every requested change to keep track of how many number of changes have come in. Ensuring that every document change is approved or rejected. This goes through the change management plan. Implementing only the approved changes, then documenting and updating the impact of approved changes on scope, cost, budget, schedule, quality, staffing. So everything, all the impact needs to be documented as well. Then these changes are going to go through the change control process and going through the configuration management. So configuration control is focused on specification of deliverables, processes, while change control focuses on identifying, documenting, and approving or rejecting the changes to deliverables. So if you refer to the PMBOK, so that talks about the configuration management activities, more on configuration identification, status accounting, and verification on audit, because every configuration item, any documents needs to be audited in every regular interval to see whether the configuration management process has been adhered to. Generally, we talk about the change management process, looking at the change management process and see if it has all the processes have been followed diligently here. So considering or documenting changes in integrated fashion reduces on project risk. So that is a key thing that we need to note from the project perform integrated change control process. Now let's look at the inputs. Inputs are project management plan, work performance reports, change requests, project documents. So these are the things which we have already discussed. Then other inputs are EEF and OPA. So for when we look at OPA, so some of the things that we refer to the OPA is the change control procedures that was implemented already, procedures for approving and issuing change authorizations. Then what are the process measurement that we do, project documents, the configuration management knowledge base containing versions, baselines of standards, policies and procedures, so as to ensure that we take the latest version of it. So these are the things that we look in your repository. Let's look at some of the key things with respect to the perform integrated change control, which is the change management plan. That's going to describe how the change on the project will be managed and controlled. So there's a change management procedure that we defined, which will be which will be discussed and approved by all the stakeholders. And any changes in future, once this document is baseline, we'll have to adhere to the processes mentioned in this change management plan. And the configuration management plan ensures everyone knows what version of the scope, schedule and other components of the plan are the latest version. So generally most of the organization use the version control tool to track the latest version of it. So change control system is part of the configuration management system, which is part of the PMIS again. So PMIS is the biggest database within which you have a configuration management plan, configuration management system, within which you have the change control system. So change management is going to be a very key with respect to handling the project. The project manager needs to keep much close attention to the change management processes. So let's look at next the tools and techniques. Again, some of the techniques which we have already seen, the expert judgment, meetings, the change control tools, the tools which such as the version control, the configuration management tool, change management tools. Tools are used to manage the change request and resulting decisions. So project manager tools are going to help manager enable the managers to do their work efficiently. So these are some of the tools. The data analysis, which is going to trigger you using this change management, come up with the changes, and decision making. So these are some of the tools and techniques. And the outputs are going to be approved change requests, because here is where the project, the CCB, the change control board, which will be defined as part of the change management plan. The change control board looks at all the impact of the changes and then approves them, approves or rejects them. So only those approved change requests are the key which is going to be needs to be executed. So change requests are processed according to the change control system by the project manager, change control board, CCB, or by an assigned team member. And this is also going to provide any project management plan updates and project document updates. Especially one of the key project document update is going to be the change log. So the change log will contain all the requested changes, and only those changes that are approved will be taken for execution. All the other changes which are rejected will just be documented in the change log as rejected with the appropriate reason as well. So changes to baseline do not affect past performance. So that's a key thing that we need to note here. So let's look at some of the key processes. Like one is the develop project charter. So just kind of a recap here. So selection process for projects, and projects must support the company's strategic goals. So these are the key things that we need to look from an exam point of view. When a situation is given, these are the things that we need to take into consideration. So we need to always think that there is a sound business case for every project, and assume organizations have information such as historical records, lessons learned from previous project, and information is available. So the reason why say this is, when a situation is given in an exam, we cannot try to relate to what we are doing currently in our organization. So that could be some process, that could be a PMO in our organization, there could not be a PMO in some organizations, there may not be a repository, lessons learned repository. So when we take a question and when we try to find an answer, we cannot relate to what we are doing today. So that's where we just want to give a tip here. In the sense, we need to assume that the organizations have a PMO, organizations have the OPA, and always the project charter will support the project strategic objectives. So that's the assumption that we need to make here. So when develop project management plan, with respect to that, when confronted with a problem, project manager first looks at the plan. So that could be a situation where somebody says this has not happened, then you don't go and defend yourselves immediately. The first thing that you need to look at is whether it was properly planned or not, and then maybe we need to take the respective actions accordingly. Management plans look to the future, and there is a management plan for all knowledge areas. So there's an assumption again that as per the PMI, we need to create all the project management plans, all the subsidiary plans. Again, we cannot relate to our current organization rules that I don't have a communication management, so I don't look at the communication document. No, we cannot look that way. So that's a tip that we are providing here. And monitor and control. If there is a question about significant deviations from baseline, there might be an answer related to risk management. If there is a deviation, then I need to take a corrective action. Then if I have to take a corrective action, I need to raise a change request. Then, which means that I go and revisit my plan. So I need to look at the risk as well. So this is just a tip for you to remember when you address or encounter some situational questions in the exam. So let's just have a high level overview of this perform integrated change control process. So the key thing, the steps is identify the change, analyze the change, document, approve. So anywhere, the change could come from anywhere. So here, analyze, document, and approve is part of your integrated change control process. Then now what is the next step? We implement the changes. So here it goes to direct and manage project work, then verify the changes. So here the quality management comes into picture where the changes are verified. So we'll talk more about verification and validation and the quality. So here the changes are executed and it's been verified whether it's been done in the right way, and then validated. So validated is here the customer is coming up and looking at your changes and validating your changes, and then finally accept. So once it is accepted, it goes to close project or phase, which is the next process. So the customer acceptance will be the input for close project or phase, and then finally we close the project. Alright, so now let's look at the next final process in the project integration management knowledge area, which is close project or phase. So here, assuming that customer has validated the scope, customer has agreed upon your deliverables, now we need to take some certain actions to close the project. So that's what we're going to look here. As per PMBOK, it's a process of finalizing all activities across all the project management process groups to formally complete a project or phase. Okay, so one thing we need to remember here is We are not closing the project, close project or phase as well. So let's assume there's a project life cycle where we have requirements, design, development, testing, and going live, UAT, for example. So requirements is a phase, design is a phase, development is a phase. So we can initiate a requirement, we can plan for requirements, execute the requirements, then we can monitor and control the requirements, and then once finally the requirement is done, everything is done, then we can close the requirements also. So closing does not mean always closing the entire project, it could be a phase as well. Alright, now let's look at some of the inputs, tools and techniques and output of this process. The key input is going to be the project charter, because that was the initiated, we created a project charter. Now when we close it, we need to know whether it's really relevant, whatever has been defined in the project charter. The project management plan, all the project documents, accepted deliverables. So accepted deliverables is monitor and control. The customer had validated the deliverable, so customer has accepted it. Then business documents, which was the business case and the benefit management plan that we saw. So now probably that is required for us to validate that whether it is everything has been done accordingly. Then agreements, again the contracts between the customer and the service provider. Then the procurement documentation, in case if some part of the work has been outsourced or any other procurement that has happened for this project. Then OPA. So expert judgment is going to be one of the key techniques. Data analysis, again meetings, which we have already seen. Then finally output is going to be final product, service or result transition. That is, we hand over the deliverables to the customer or we hand it over to the operations team. And final report of the entire project or a phase, then project document updates and OP updates. So the key benefits is it provides lessons learned, the formal ending of the project work, and release our organization resource to pursue new endeavors. So once we hand over the deliverables to the customer, then the lessons learned are completed by the project team, code is available at that point in time, and then all the documents are completed, they are archived, the resources are released from the project, they are back to their functions or they are back to the bench, or they may be back to other project, they'll be assigned to other projects. So they're released basically, and then all the administrative closure happens here. So what we should know about closing project: the project is not done when the technical work is done. So we cannot say I'm done with my deliverables, I'm done with my project. No. So it must be formally closed with a formal acceptance from the customer, issuance of a final report, issuance of lessons learned document, and archiving all the project records. So we are updating everything to the organization process assets. And what are the key benefits or actions? Providing lessons learned, formal ending of project work, release of organization resources, transfer to next phase or to operations, archive project information for project use. So these are the key benefits that this process brings about. Whether the project is terminated, stopped or completed, this process will be invoked. So close project or phase, let's look at the inputs, which we have already seen a lot of inputs, tools and techniques which are going to be same. Project management plan, accepted deliverables. So it may include approved product specification, delivery receipts and work performance documents during the course of the project whether that has been created. And accepted deliverables is here the customer has validated the scope and customer has provided signed off. Then organization process assets. The other inputs are project documents, all the documents that have been created during the course of the project. Then the business documents, the business case, benefit management plan, which if you recollect, it was the key input in the project charter. Then the agreements and procurement documents. The techniques, expert judgment, again looking at all these documents to see whether the project has finally reached its objective. The data analysis, looking at the document analysis, trend and variance analysis, how it has been done, and then meetings. And finally the output is final product, service or results transition. So here transitioning the final product, either you hand it over to the customer or you hand it over to the operations for further use. and going and updating all the documents. I mean, archiving all the records and updating in the OPA. Final report. This talks about summary of the project performance overall. So now during the monitoring controlling, we have been doing the project performance at a very periodic interval. Now overall, taking the end-to-end project into consideration, looking at a final report of how the project performed, and then the project document updates, lessons learned register. So that concludes the close of project phase. And now let's just look at the PMIism with respect to the project integration management. So as I said earlier, we should unlearn what we are doing today. We cannot relate to our current organization or current role. So from a PMP exam perspective, we need to look at, these are the things we need to remember. One, no project starts without a charter. So which means always a project charter exists in a project. Project plan is not a bar chart but a series of management plans. So a lot of people confuse with project plan, project management plan and a project plan. Project plan is your project plan with all the list of all the activities that you need to do. We'll be talking more in the scope and time and cost management, coming up with the entire project plan. So project plan is not a bar chart, it's a project management plan with series of management plans, all the subsidiary plans that we spoke about. Project cost and schedule cannot be finalized without completing risk management. So earlier we used to talk about only the triple constraints, which is scope, time and cost. But now we need to expand more to the other knowledge areas and see. Generally we talk about project constraints. So it's not only the project scope, time and cost, it's very quality, risk, procurements, communication, everything we need to look at it. Project management plan is approved by all parties, is realistic and everyone believes it can be achieved. So it should be a realistic document. It cannot be a wishful document which we will not be able to achieve, but it should be realistic and everybody should agree to it as well. So project manager cannot create a baseline on his own. It needs to be circulated to all the stakeholders and everybody should be in sync with what is being derived in the project management plan. So project manager plans when and how to measure performance against the performance measurement baseline as documented in the project management plan. All changes to the project management plan flow through the change management process and integrated change control, and assume all projects have a change control board. Again, this is another key thing where a lot of us may not have a CCB in our organization. So here we need to assume that the CCB is always available and it goes through the change management processes. Alright, so now we come to the entire review of the entire project integration management. So what is project integration management? It is a primary role for a project manager and it integrates, unifies, consolidates all the processes that a project manager does during the life cycle of the project. And we have 7 processes defined in the integration management, starting with develop project charter, part of initiation, then develop project management plan, part of planning, direct and manage project work execution, manage project knowledge, monitor and control project work, perform integrated change control, part of the monitoring and controlling, and finally close project of phase, part of closing process group. So this concludes the project integration management, and in the next video we will talk about the scope management. Thank you.